This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
I wrote a book, Straight Talk on Your Money. You've probably heard me mention it once or twice on this podcast. When I sent the manuscript to my editor, she read it and told me that all of the chapters made sense, except for one, where I talked about investing. She said it was outside of the theme of the book. I disagreed, we had a lively discussion back and forth, and in the end, my editor prevailed, and I shortened the chapter 16 for those of you who are following along at home. And in that chapter, I made the point that before worrying about investing, you should reduce your debt, minimize your expenses, develop a savings habit, and start reading books and articles and learning about investing. It was a short chapter, only 6 pages. So I published the book, and since then I've given talks at places like libraries, and invariably after every speech I give, someone asks me about investing. What should I invest in? I don't give specific investing advice, so I refer them back to chapter 16. But it's a good question. If you take my advice and deal with your debt, and you balance your budget and start saving money, what should you do with your savings? One answer is to hire a financial advisor, but how do you know who you can trust? Is the person at the bank a financial advisor? What about someone selling you mutual funds? Are they a financial advisor, or are they just a salesman who makes their money selling you something? And am I right about debt? Is debt a problem heading into retirement, or with low interest rates, is that something you don't need to worry about? I've got lots of questions, and today I've traveled to Markham, Ontario to interview a guy who can answer those questions and more. So let's get started. Who are you and what do you do?
Hello, Doug. My name is Jason Heath. I'm a fee-only financial planner, and to clarify, what that means is that I don't sell investments, I don't sell insurance. I'm not a mutual fund salesperson, as most financial planners are. As a fee-only financial planner, I sell my advice for a fee. Lately, I've started to use the moniker advice only. Some people would call a fee-only financial planner a fee-for-service financial planner, but it's a financial planner who doesn't sell products, sells advice.
So let's contrast then the two different types, though. So, I go to my bank and I talk to the bank person there, and they say, oh, you need to buy this mutual fund. How does the bank make money?
Well, generally when you invest in any financial product, including a mutual fund, there are fees that are embedded that get paid to the investment firm and to the advisor. And quite frankly, oftentimes working with someone in a bank, you're not even working with someone who is a certified financial planner or even a financial planner for that matter. They might just have a mutual fund license and a little bit of training. So it's hard in Canada, quite frankly, to tell exactly who you're talking to and what professional competencies they have.
So I want to get you to clarify that, but let's finish off then on an advice-only planner or a fee-only planner and the other kind. So I buy a mutual fund from the bank or my investment advisor or whatever. They're getting compensated by the mutual fund company then.
Yeah, more often than not, when people are working with a financial advisor, they're getting paid based on the products that they're purchasing or the investment or the insurance that they own.
Gotcha. So if I go to the bank has a suite of funds that they can sell me, but it's not a suite of every fund. It's only the funds that the bank deals with.
Exactly.
That's gotcha.
Right.
And if I go to ABC Mutual Fund Company, well, obviously they're only going to sell me ABC Mutual Funds. They're not going to sell me anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get that, and I can see that there's kind of a bit of bias there then, because if I'm the person selling ABC funds, I'm only going to sell ABC funds. I'm not going to sell you any other kind of fund, but I'm also perhaps not going to sell you stocks or bonds or real estate or, I don't know, cryptocurrency or whatever the latest thing is. I mean, we're recording this in June of 2018, right? Have I got my years right? And the big thing in the news right now is all these cannabis stocks. That's the latest thing. Cannabis. We're all gonna, these are all where all the stocks are. Well, the mutual fund companies don't have any of those yet because, well, as we record this in early June, it's not fully legal yet, and so they don't want to get into it. So you're somewhat biased in what you're getting, but then there's the whole fee aspect of it. Yeah. So explain that to me then. So you said you are a fee-only financial planner. So how I just pay you then? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, we operate not unlike a lawyer or an accountant who charges a fee for their services, who sells their time, whether it's on an hourly basis, whether it's on a a project basis. Sometimes we charge annual retainer fees. So there's different ways to pay for financial advice. This is one of the least common ways to do it, but I think the example you gave of the mutual fund salesperson in the bank is a great one. If you walk into a bank and you ask for financial advice, and the only way that person gets compensated is selling, TD Bank mutual funds, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get sold a TD mutual fund, even though debt repayment may be a better option, even though investing in your business may be a better option, even though something other than a mutual fund may be a better option. So, they say when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's part of the problem with the financial industry. And it's one of the reasons that I love what I do, because we're indifferent. We don't have a certain outcome that we're looking to achieve. We just sell advice, and whatever advice applies to the specific client, we can give it with no strings attached.
And so at what level of income or assets does it make sense to start dealing with someone like you? I mean, if I'm a 17-year-old kid with a paper route, well, I guess there's no such thing as paper routes anymore, and I make $20 a week, then that's probably not, I'm probably not dealing with you. But at what point does it make sense to have a conversation with someone like you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can say that when I look back, I've been doing this for 16 years now, and certainly in the early days, most of my clients were high net worth individuals, people with lots of money, people with high incomes. I've seen my own practice evolve over the years, where I have a lot more young couples that I work with, a lot of people with more average situations who are looking for financial advice. And it's tough sometimes because a lot of the advice out there is catered towards people who have lots of money. You can't write a check to certain investment companies who may have a $500,000 minimum investment, but you might have great questions that a fee for service or fee only, advice only financial planner can answer. And so I've seen more average people, more young people reaching out to people like myself. And even the industry, I think, has filled a gap. There's a lot of my competitors, quite frankly, out there who cater towards millennials and cater towards people that may not have otherwise been catered to before.
And so is there a dollar value you can put on it?
No, really there isn't, because at the end of the day, when we're charging for time, somebody might only need an hour of time. They can pay for an hour of time the same way they would with a lawyer or with an accountant. So they don't need to have a minimum net worth or a minimum income or anything like that. And I think that's one of the best things about the fee-for-service industry. It's really expanding to be available and accessible to everyone.
So obviously this is a podcast about debt. So a lot of the people who listen to this podcast have gone through either a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal, and now they've come out the other end. And so before they dealt with their debt, they might have had, monthly minimum payments of $1,000, $2,000 a month on all their credit cards and bank loans and everything like that. So now that their debts are taken care of, well, that freed up a huge amount of cash, all those minimum payments they don't have to make. So using the example of someone who had a couple of $1,000s a month of minimum payments, which sounds like a huge number, but that's actually fairly typical of what a lot of my clients are dealing with. It doesn't free up $2,000 of cash, because a lot of that they were just using their line of credit to make their minimum payments. But in a lot of cases, they are a $500, $1,000 a month farther ahead than they were before they went through the process. So is that the kind of person who should think about reaching out to a financial planner, or should they wait a certain period of time until they've got a certain amount of money in the bank before thinking about something like that?
I would say it depends. I would say that it relates, doesn't necessarily relate to money you have or money that you can invest or anything like that. It's more related to questions you have and answers you're seeking. You can buy an hour of a financial planner's time and sit down and ask, should I be putting money in my RSP? Should I be putting money in my group defined contribution pension plan? Should I be putting money in my TFSA? How does an RESP work? Take a look at my financial situation and give me some direction. We certainly work with lots of clients that we build very comprehensive, in-depth financial plans for, or people that we work with year in, year out on an ongoing basis. But there's plenty of people out there that just need an hour of time to get answers answered, quite frankly. And sometimes it's not stuff you can find in a book or on the internet. And it's nice to have someone who's not trying to sell you something give you a little bit of advice. So I think it can work out well for people in a situation like you described.
Yeah, and my book only had 6 pages on it, so you're right. You're not getting a whole lot of answers on that specific topic in that book. So you do have clients who say, okay, I've done a bit of research and I understand that there's these things called TFSAs and RSPs and this is and that's, but I don't fully get how it works for me. So I write out my list of questions. I come in, I sit down with you for an hour or two or whatever, and here you go. Here's your
take notes and ask the questions that you want to ask. Sometimes it may require some follow up, but yeah, it's not unlike going to another professional and getting some advice. And sometimes we even describe it as it's almost like going to a doctor for your finances when you work with a financial planner, and not a financial planner that sells mutual funds and insurance, a true professional financial planner. You go, you do a financial health diagnosis, you have a prescription that is written and a prescription that is not tied to an end product, and that's the problem with a lot of the financial industry. You're getting prescribed things that are biased and not objective. This is a way to ensure objectivity.
So I pay you a few $100, you give me some advice, and as my wealth increases, well, maybe I'm paying you a few $100 every month, but maybe it's a once a year kind of thing.
Maybe not. And we certainly, we're biased. I always tell people our sole conflict of interest, we sell time. We'd like to sell as much as possible. We'd love everyone to be a lifelong client, but some people just need a meeting. Some people just need an hour of time and have some questions. Some of those people may come back in the future or they may not, but we try to describe to clients, here are the ways in which we can help. You tell us if one of them's a fit. Not, you need to sign up and we need to meet once a year and you need to write a check every year. Yeah, that's our bias, but not everyone needs ongoing financial planning. Some people just have a few simple questions.
Now, you mentioned the term financial planner. And so my understanding is that that's, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's a made up word, because if I'm in Quebec or if I'm in different provinces, I can call myself a financial planner because it's just a word. I mean, I'm a chartered accountant, what we now call a CPA. Well, that's an actual thing. I've got initials. I had to, you can't just call yourself that. You can't just call yourself a medical doctor. There's actually stuff you got to do. But is it true that in certain places in Canada, I can call myself a financial planner?
Yes. Quebec is the only province in Canada where there's really any restrictions. So in Ontario and all the other provinces and territories, for that matter, anybody can be a financial planner.
So I could call myself a financial planner.
Absolutely.
My mechanic can call himself a financial planner. Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, but I'm guessing there's more to it from your point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
What should I be looking for then? Anyone can call themselves a financial planner.
It's something that in Ontario, there's a lot of work and consultation being done to try to figure out who should be allowed to use the term financial planner. And I think it's really important. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm a CFP. That's my professional designation. Again, I've got a bias to say that that should be the gold standard, but it's concerning to me, and it should be concerning to consumers, that you really don't know who is a professional and who has the proper credentials. And there's people can call themselves wealth planners and wealth advisors and all these crazy names that you really don't know what they do. It's a big problem in this country, and certainly in this province.
If I work at a bank selling mutual funds, how much training would I get?
In order to get a mutual fund designation to be licensed to sell mutual funds, there's not a lot of training that you need to do. There's a course you need to pass. You could probably do it all in a couple of months. And you have knowledge in mutual fund products. You certainly don't have knowledge in financial planning. And I may also go so far as to say that there are a lot of people out there that have professional financial planning designations that they've been given, that sort of do the hard work up front, get the designation, and then might have 20 or 30 hours of ongoing continuing education they need to do that doesn't need to be too in-depth or complex. And I've seen a lot of financial planners, including certified financial planners, whose advice leaves something to be desired, quite frankly. So
what is involved to become a certified financial planner, a CFP?
It's funny, you ask now, and I'm not sure exactly how much it's changed over the years, but you need to take courses. There's a number of courses you need to take, pass successfully. There's exams that you need to take. I think now at this point there are 2 exams you need to take to become a certified financial planner. And then you need to do a certain amount of time working in the financial industry. I believe it's 2 or 3 years. So there is, courses, there's exams, there's professional experience, then there is ongoing continuing education that needs to get done. I think that the Financial Planning Standards Council and the CFP designation, in my opinion, is the gold standard. But the Financial Planning Standards Council has also been very honest, I believe, with consumers. I've seen marketing that they've done to say that, look, not all CFPs, not all certified financial planners are created equal. And that's kind of interesting to see that from a professional body, to say, look, we are confident in what we put out there, but not all CFPs are the same. And I think that's really important for consumers to remember.
Well, and I guess that's the same as saying not all chartered accountants or not all CPAs are the same.
You got it.
I mean,
absolutely.
You don't want to come to me for detailed corporate tax advice, because even though I studied it 20 years ago, that's not my area of expertise. So how then should someone listening go about trying to hire a financial advisor or a financial planner?
I'll be frank. I'd like to give you a good answer, but I don't have a good one. I have people ask me sometimes, even, how do I pick an investment advisor? And it's tough, because there is no designation, in my opinion, that can adequately describe a person's level of knowledge. I come across people who are not certified financial planners who have very strong financial planning knowledge. And I come across other CFPs who are really good at, whatever company they work for, knowing their mutual funds in and out, but know nothing about tax and estate planning and other components of financial planning. So it's hard. I think at the very least, I would look for a professional designation, but I think it's also important to ask questions and to know what you're looking for. If someone is looking for complex tax and estate planning advice, definitely not all CFPs are created equal. If you're just looking for someone to, write an insurance policy or something, then that requires a different skill set.
So ask questions. Here's what I think I need. You have that expertise. And then I guess, asking around too.
Asking around kind of sort of helps, but the other thing that I've found over the years is we'll have clients we work with who say, I've got this great investment advisor. I've worked with him for 20 years, and you sit down and you look at their investments and say, this isn't very good. Sometimes people don't have good perspective on what good is. We do. So even asking a family member or a friend, hey, do you have a recommendation? You might get a recommendation they think is excellent, but isn't. And it's one of the reasons why I think government regulation, particularly here in Ontario, where they are looking to restrict the financial planning designation and the provision of financial planning advice, is super important, because it's so broad what you get out there.
Well, and I've always been a big believer in, you got to look after yourself. And so that's why, in the 6 pages of the book I did address this issue, I did make the comment that I think it is a good idea to read books, get some vague understanding, so that when you are interviewing a potential advisor, you at least have a vague clue what to ask. I mean, if I've got a medical issue, then I'm going to go to the internet and look it up, and I'll obviously misdiagnose myself because I'm not a doctor, but at least I know a few questions to ask. Hey, doctor, do I have this? Because it looks like my symptoms meet it. And no, you're not pregnant, Mr. Hoyes. I don't think you got the wrong thing, But at least you've got a bit of a baseline as to where to start. So. Okay, so it's difficult. I mean, that's what you're saying.
For sure.
You're going to have to do some due diligence here, and I guess the more important your money is to you and protecting it to you, then you got to put some effort into it. And it's not really realistic to say, well, I'm going to spend 10 minutes a year thinking about my money and my investments and everything. You're going to have to do a little bit more than that and find someone who can help you through it. So. Yeah. Okay, so this show is about debt. So I want to ask you some questions about debt. And you write for a number of publications. MoneySense.ca is one of them. And in that one, you answer questions from readers. And there was one question that you answered a few months ago, and I'll put links to this in the show notes over at hoyes.com. But the question was, and I'm going to quote it here. It's from a guy named Art. I'm not sure if that's his real name or not, but let's assume it is. So, I'm retiring, single male, 65 years old, with $850,000 total in RSPs and a DCP where I currently work. What's a DCP?
That's a defined contribution pension plan. So sort of like a group RSP.
Gotcha. And a defined contribution one. Okay. Yeah. So he's got assets. He's got retirement assets. I have no debt. I owe $50,000 on a $500,000 home. I pay $730 a month. Mortgage is due May 2019. Penalty would be minimal. Should I pay it out in 2018, my first year unemployed, in quotes, meaning retired? What are my options? Now, so that's Art's questions. Now, I personally think it's great that Art says, I have no debt. I owe $50,000 on my home.
Mortgage isn't debt.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not really quite sure you can have no debt but owe money. But anyways, I guess what he's talking about is unsecured debt. He's talking about debt not secured by a home. So before we get to Art's question, do you find it common that people don't think of mortgages as debt?
Yeah, absolutely. I frequently people say I have no debt, but I have a $500,000 mortgage. People don't, and I think particularly in recent years, particularly in Ontario, particularly in the Toronto area, I mean, a mortgage is a means to an investment, being real estate that just continually rises until this year. So, I see that all the time, and I think it's a misnomer. It is
debt. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not as damaging as a payday loan, or maybe it is. I mean, we can perhaps talk about some of your client experiences. But, okay, so let's break Art's question down into two parts. So I think what he's actually, he's talking about secured debt, his mortgage, but let me ask you first, what's your opinion on carrying unsecured debt into retirement? So I'm talking about debt like credit cards and payday loans and things like that.
Well, I think that in a perfect world, retirees have no debt. I think in a perfect world, nobody has debt, but we don't live in a perfect world. And I find it, sometimes I think it can be arrogant for financial planners to say, you can't have debt in retirement. Frankly, sometimes it happens. Frankly, sometimes people get retired earlier than they wish to retire, get a severance package a few years before they want to retire. They have a child who's sick or goes through a divorce, needs help. It happens. I think to the extent that you can try to avoid debt going to retirement makes sense, but sometimes it does happen, and I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world, particularly when I look at Art's case here. $850,000 in investments, $500,000 home. He's got $1.35 million in assets, and a $50,000 mortgage. It's not much. It certainly doesn't worry me as a financial planner on the outside looking in. I don't know all the other factors, but that's not a big worry. It is clearly to Art, though.
Well, okay, so let's talk about Art's situation then. What is your advice to him? Because he's sitting there going, should I mean, he doesn't state this in the question, but what he's really saying is, should I cash in some of my RSPs and use that money to pay off the mortgage so that there is no mortgage when I retire? How would you walk him through that thought process? Yeah,
I mean, I think in Art's case and in anyone's case, I sometimes see this with people who are in their working years and say, well, I've got this debt and I want to get rid of it. Should I just pull money out of my RSP? And my answer would be the same as it is to Art. In order to pay off $50,000 of debt, it's not as simple as pulling $50,000 out of your RSP. You have to pay a tax on money that you pull out of your RSP, and Art might need to pull out $100,000 from his RSP to be left with $50,000 to pay off the debt. So is it worth pulling $100,000 from your RSP to pay off $50,000 in debt? I don't know. Particularly during your working years when you have a high income, I'd say pulling money of your RSP to pay off debt is generally not advisable. At least Art's retired, probably has a fairly low income, but Art still needs to pay for his other living expenses. All he has is RSPs. He might need to pull $200,000 out of his RSP in the next year to pay for his living expenses and pay for paying off this debt. So I think it can be short-sighted sometimes to look at an investment account like an RSP and say, well, I might as well just pay it off or pull money out and pay off this debt.
And I guess if we were talking 10 years in the future when mortgage interest rates are, 12% and you're earning 1% in your RSP, it might be a different story.
Things. I mean, that's part of it as well. If he's got a mortgage, he doesn't reference the interest rate, but I'd be surprised with that much home equity and that strong a net worth if he was paying a high rate. He's paying 3% on his mortgage interest rate, and even if he's investing at 3%, it's at least a wash. I think it would be different if, in this case, the money was in a tax-free savings account where he could pull the money out tax-free, or if it was a regular investment account or a savings account. That's different. But when you're talking about RSPs and debt, it can be very expensive to pay off debt with RSPs, and that's something for all your listeners to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I guess that's a classic example of where talking to a financial expert is a good idea, because they can actually walk you through that scenario. And I see this in my business all the time. Now, I don't have a whole lot of people who have $800,000 in their RSP, but certainly people who have some money and they say, well, I'm thinking of just taking the money out and paying off my debts. Well, if you've got $25,000 in your RSP and you got $50,000 worth of debts, then you can't eliminate your debt by taking the money out. And when you do take the money out, like you say, you get hit with a big tax hit, because it'll be at whatever your top marginal tax rate is. So in a lot of cases, if you've got a huge amount of debt, and that's obviously not Art's case here because he doesn't have any unsecured debt, but doing a proposal or a bankruptcy may be a better option, because so long as the money's been in your RSP for a year, you're not going to lose it even if you go bankrupt. So again, I'm not saying that, oh, well, that's definitely what you should do. I think you and I are saying the same thing. Yeah, there are options either way. Talk to someone who actually knows and decide from there.
Absolutely. I think it's really important, whether it's a listener who is in this situation or even their advisors. I think it's something that a lot of financial advisors, financial planners, wealth planners, or whatever you want to call them, have to consider as well. I mean, they may have a client who's, in a good position financially because they have a lot of investments, but get in trouble spending too much money and find themselves in need of your services.
Now, we're sitting in Markham, Ontario here, where the real estate market has been very strong over many years, because we're, basically on the northern tip of Toronto. Do you have clients who are heavily invested in real estate? Is that a concern of you? What's the typical profile of, or what kind of things are you seeing?
Yeah, we work with all different kinds of clients, whether in Toronto or elsewhere in Canada or even the world for that matter. So we see a pretty big cross section, but I certainly do come across more and more people these days who are taking on large amounts of debt to move into larger homes. Modeling out long-term financial plans. We're showing them, look, you're never going to pay this debt off. Downsizing is going to have to be part of your retirement plan, so to speak. One of the things that worries me a lot is when you have two high-income earners who take on a huge amount of debt. What happens if one of them loses their job? What happens if one of them becomes disabled and doesn't have adequate disability insurance? It's pretty easy to get yourself into financial difficulty. But I see a lot of people putting a lot of hope on higher real estate prices, buying rental properties. It is concerning, because it doesn't take much, whether it's real estate, whether it's life, whether it's losing a job, whether it's death or disability, to really change things just like that. So I think sometimes people with the best of financial intentions and in a good financial position can get themselves into trouble.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good place to end it, that you have the best of intentions. And I mean, we've talked to, I had Rachel Berube on the show talking about real estate, and every one of her clients, she's a property manager, is putting in money every month to support the condo that they're renting out. So, great, I can rent it out for $2,000 a month, but my mortgage payments are $2,500 a month. And so it's not an investment in the traditional sense unless real estate prices keep going up.
Right.
So I guess that's where a financial advisor who's completely unbiased can take a step back and say, well, okay, I understand exactly what you've done, but let's sort of stress test it. What if real estate prices don't go up? What if the stock market doesn't go up? What if you lose your job? I assume that's a big part of what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of what we do is just providing a sounding board for clients. And it's not our job to say, this is the way that you should invest your money, or this is how much money you should spend on wine or restaurants or whatever. It's more to say, here are some of the financial factors you should be considering in your life, trying to educate people, help them make smart financial decisions, and what might be the best decision for one person may be very different from what it is for someone else. So I think that's the key with what we do, and we're not biased in trying to steer people in any one direction. It's kind of nice to have someone who's not motivated to put you into a certain type of product. So that's where we pride ourselves.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. So how can people find you?
Website's www.objectivefinancialpartners.com. I write for Money Sense and the Financial Post and Retire Happy, and try to put out great content there for people that are looking to educate themselves about personal finance. And yeah, certainly glad to help if we can be of assistance to any of the listeners out there.
Excellent. And Twitter, what are you on Twitter?
I'm a good question. What am I? I'm at Jason Heath CFP, Certified Financial Planner. At Jason Heath CFP.
Excellent. So what I will do in the show notes is I will put links to your profiles on Money Sense and Financial Post and so on, as well as to your website, Objective Financial Partners, and your link on Twitter, and people can track you down there.
Yeah, good stuff.
Jason, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That was Jason Heath, a fee-only or advice-only financial planner with Objective Financial Partners, Inc., and a frequent media commentator. As always, as I said, I'll have links to everything we talked about today, including links to find Jason if you're looking for a financial planner, and a full transcript of today's show over at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.